Oh, so you saw the title of the video. Maybe you're feeling a little bit attacked over it. It is a bit of a hot take, I'll give you that, but Oblivion is a really good game. Now, I do enjoy the other Elder Scrolls games. I've had a lot of fun with them, but do they have this?
3, 4. I sure don't like my double. 5, 6. She doesn't count right. 1, 2. Hater. 3, 4. Sick woman. 5, 6.
Or moments like this?
There's no time to waste. Follow me.
I've always hated admitting this, but Oblivion is my first Bethesda game. I wish I could be one of the cool kids saying like, oh no, Daggerfall, that's where it's at, or Morrowind, I enjoy playing that, my childhood. But no, somehow those games kind of slipped me by when I was younger, and Oblivion was my introduction to the series. While other people reminisce about Morrowind or Daggerfall or even Arena, I've always kind of felt like the kid in the corner sucking on glue because Oblivion was always my favorite, and something about that's always felt kind of odd, but here I am to make a video about it to say, nah, Oblivion's great. Oblivion's awesome. I don't know why Oblivion has this weird vibe to it that the other games don't quite have. It's almost like it's a little bit special, a little bit different, and you need to tell it what a great job it did. Maybe hang out some of its work on the fridge while its older brother Morrowind is out slaying sliz at the frat house. All that being said though, Oblivion is my favorite Elder Scrolls game. I really feel like it has some magic to it that the others don't quite capture in the same way. Bethesda games and their magic is something many people, like myself, have really grown to love. Like many of you, I was hyped for Starfield and eagerly jumped into what I hoped to be a massive adventure among the stars. Like many of you, in a state of confusion, I started reinstalling Elder Scrolls and Fallout games to make sure I could still feel any sense of joy again. Turns out it wasn't me. Here I'll be looking at Oblivion and seeing how it stands today. Yes, the game broke grounds when it was released, and honestly, I remember that being a reason I bought the game to begin with, as it looked like something to really push my new GeForce 7800 card. Little did I know that what I was buying was basically digital crack, and I was about to get very hooked. The game was a big deal when it came out, and while it didn't quite break the mainstream in the same way Skyrim did, it was still something many people were playing, and it was a pretty big success. Today we see it in kind of this weird light, since it doesn't have the charm of Morrowind with its deeper magical systems and stats, and it doesn't have the additional polish that Skyrim got, where it felt like they had really figured out how to keep stats easy but strategic. Oblivion is in this weird middle ground, but whenever I jump in to play again, I still have a blast. So I wanted to do a review of this game to share my love for it, and see if it's still as good as I remember. How has it been almost 20 years? After playing a little Oblivion, I quickly got sucked in and wasn't getting anything else done. It was high school and 2006 all over again for me. Responsibilities? The fucking Emperor's dead, you twits! I can't do homework, we've got the gates of Oblivion to push back! When the game came out, I was in high school, so it was easy skirting responsibilities when I was living under the rule of my mother.
Come help with the dishes, please.
Fuck you!
Living with my wife, though, it's not quite as easy.
Joel, can you get back to work?
Fuck you!
This game is big, so let's get into it.
My blood for the Empire.
I feel like Oblivion's always kind of been the black sheep of the series, and it's fair to see why, as the game definitely has its shortcomings. Like other Elder Scrolls games, the game scales to your level, meaning you'll encounter stronger enemies and better loot the higher level you are. The issue with scaling in Oblivion is if you don't manage your stats and stuff carefully, you'll quickly run into this. Or maybe this. Like said, if you have a good understanding of your stats and not leveling too quickly, you can get around this, but it's something you always need to be mindful of with the game. For me, this is the main gripe I have with the game, so I want to get that out early because otherwise it is a really good game and there's lots that I can gush about how much I enjoy it. It's just that is kind of a sticking point the game has, and especially replaying it now, I can really feel that kind of grindiness that starts to come in when you get to those higher levels. And I think it's kind of a shame that people don't revisit this as much as Skyrim or Morrowind. Skyrim's the kind of game where you want to accomplish everything with one character, and you totally can. Which is pretty different from Morrowind, where certain quests and guilds conflict with each other, which encourages multiple playthroughs, but forces you to take a more linear path with each character. Oblivion, it feels like it's in this weird place where it's trying to figure itself out with the endgame, as you can do everything, but if you do everything and get all your stats leveled to 100, you'll quickly get to a point where it just feels like everything takes forever to kill due to the game's scaling, and it kind of loses its fun for me as it starts to feel like a grind. Despite this issue, the game is still great to play. Can you argue that Skyrim is the better game? Maybe. But it just doesn't have that same charm as Oblivion, you know, like that Oblivion riz. Oblivion just has like a vibe to it. That charm is kind of hard to describe. It's almost like living in a world where everybody is just on the spectrum and they have no sense of personal space. I mean no offense by saying that. It's just very comforting in a weird way. At the time of its release, the game looked great on PC, but I do remember it really struggled to play on my machine. These days, it's pretty easy to run though, and you can usually get it pretty cheap on Steam or GOG. The game still doesn't look too bad running on today's higher resolution displays, and when running through some of the overgrown environments, I kind of even forget it's an older game. But then of course you look at some of the locals and it brings you right back and you go, oh yeah, this is a pretty old game. If you want to up the visuals, you always have mods on PC, but don't worry, we'll get into that later. If you're just a console person, yeah, you can still play it on a PS3 or an Xbox 360, as that's how a lot of us were playing it back in 2006. However, you may not remember how badly it kind of played in those consoles. You'll be playing with frame rates that struggle to stay at 30, so I really wouldn't recommend that. Fortunately, Microsoft has put a fair bit of effort into making some of their backwards compatible games run even better on their current-gen systems, and with them owning Bethesda, they've given this treatment to Oblivion. So just brace yourself for Microsoft's very confusing lineup here. If you have an Xbox One X, you can play in 4K, or you can play with better frame rate, but you can't do both. If you own the current Series S or Series X systems though, not the 1S, just the S, you will get the best of both worlds, with the game running at 60 FPS and 4K on the Series X, and a reduced 1440p if you're on the Series S. Playing the game in the Series S for me ended up being such a decent looking and very smooth experience that that's how I ended up playing this game for this review. Usually I'm much more of a PC guy, so it was nice to play now and finally unlock those pointless but weirdly satisfying achievements. One of the things that makes Elder Scrolls games so much fun to play is just the replayability. Each time you play through, you're always thinking about different playstyles you can do, whether it's stealth, or maybe you're going to do more of an action-type person with swords. Maybe you're going to do fisticuffs for everything. That's how I like to play. And Oblivion is no exception to this. Let's go over and reminisce about the main quest. So the main quest line, we start with you once again being some prisoner who is destined for greatness. The Emperor sees this and lets you break out of jail. But then, oopsie, he dies. You fucked up. You blew it. The Blades blew it. And now the land's being invaded by Daedric horrors. Kind of wish this wasn't all just a big long trek through the sewers for the introduction of the game. Maybe instead you could go see the city of Kvatch and how all hell broke loose there as the gate opened. But whatever. If Todd wants us to start playing in Pooh, then that's what we'll do. I'll never forget the first time I stepped into Cyrodiil, way back when I first played this game. It felt so exciting to have this sense of being able to go wherever you wanted. It definitely doesn't leave the same sense of awe that newer Bethesda RPGs typically open with, and it is odd looking at the location from directly outside the sewer with the overall lack of detail to it compared to some of the many other more detailed locations around Cyrodiil. Either way, I always get quickly hooked into just exploring and trying to uncover various map locations before moving on to the main quest. The main appeal to these games for many, I do think, is a sense of exploration. You always have some sort of overall objective going into the game, like, I need to go fetch this book from the top of the mountain for some tart back in town. Usually just a few minutes into my journey, I find some cool-looking path going into a cave or some goblin pops out to say hello from a place that's almost definitely filled with loot. Sorry, lady, the book's gonna have to wait a few more hours. I've got cool shit to find. That's part of that Bethesda magic that these games always have. Wherever you go, you'll be finding new things, discovering new stuff that you want to explore, and it really adds to this whole sense of grand adventure. The main quest in this game is pretty fun. With the Emperor dead, you learn he has an illegitimate son. Cheeky, Uriel. You need to get to his son Martin to use the Amulet of Kings to relight the dragonfires and seal the gates of Oblivion to thwart the plans of the evil Daedric Prince of Destruction. Typical Elder Scrolls fare. I do quite like how you have the gates of Oblivion throughout the land, and you can journey through them to go through a particularly challenging dungeon that has an enchanted item at the end. I always quite enjoyed doing these. At first. Because it was a great way to level up. The enchantments you get are usually quite powerful, even though you roll the dice each time to see what you get. Sometimes they be kind of useless because they are random. After doing it a few times though, the dungeon becomes very repetitive, especially at higher levels where everything seems to take days to fight. You go on fighting the Mythic Dawn, who eventually gets a real big gate open for a full-on Daedric invasion. You're able to get the Amulet Kings back, which lets Martin light the fires, turns into some sort of godlike thing. Big battle, big fight, good guys win, good stuff.
What do you mean, gone?
The Mage's Guild questline is kind of a mixed bag. Some people dig it, some people don't. I kind of like the idea of going from town to town to get my recommendations so I could accept it to be one of the elites in the Arcane University. It kind of gives me weird Pokemon vibes, like I'm traveling across Cyrodiil to get my recommendations, which are like my badges, so I could be the best mage there ever was. Some of the quests are quite memorable, like one we had to find a missing mage but find out that they're invisible, playing a prank on their underqualified higher-up. Another one I liked is where you have to pretend to be a traveling merchant in order to find a mage who has been robbing people. Personally, the Mages Guild was always one of my favorite factions in Oblivion. While almost finishing my journey and getting accepted to the university, I accidentally took a scroll though that I didn't realize was owned and got kicked out for stealing.
Thief! You won't get away with this.
They told me I could rejoin though, so that's nice. But then it started this quest that was quite possibly one of the most painful quests in the entire game. Seriously, the guy who gives you this quest, he even foreshadows on how simple it is, but how much of a terrible time you're gonna have. One thing I had to find was a plant called Dragon Tongue. It wasn't too hard to find, but I had to find 20 of them, so it still took me some time. The other, though, is a redwort flower. I spent hours just searching along lakes, looking through forests. It got to a point where I just started being invisible all the time, so that way I didn't have to deal with any stupid Bethesda magic. I just wasn't in the mood for it. I just wanted to get back into that pretentious guild. Once you do join the Arcane University, you do get a lot open up to, though, in terms of getting to make your own spells. Personally, I always enjoy making high percentage chameleon spells, as at 100%, the game kind of becomes a big cheese walk. The Fighters Guild. Not as much of a mixed bag, more of just like a bag. If you're someone who actually enjoyed the Fighters Guild, then you're probably actually remembering the Skyrim quest for it, not this one. That one wasn't bad. In Oblivion, you're pretty much going to be limited to doing cave runs or kill the bad thing requests. One quest that was kind of memorable is we get the rats in the basement quest back from Morrowind, but this time the rats are actually the woman's pets, so she wants you protecting them from mountain lions rather than getting rid of them. As you progress through the Fighters Guild, you find out about the enemy guild, the Blackwood Company. You get to go in, infiltrate the competition, and just murder everyone there, taking all their armor. The enchanted armor you get is pretty decent, but it's up to you if you feel like it's worth pushing through this quest line. When doing reruns of the game, the Fighters Guild is usually something that I'll just kind of skip, because it's just not that interesting going through. Then it always pains me just looking through the different factions I'm part of, and there is the Fighters Guild, and I'm just bottom of the ladder while everything else I'm exceeding. I definitely prefer making my way through the Fighters Guild in Morrowind or Skyrim, but I'm still happy it's here, and it's more content if you want it. The arena is a pretty fun one, and it's also very straightforward. You ask for a fight, you get a fight, you get paid, rank up. Keep ranking up, and eventually you fight the arena champion, the Grey Prince. Most of the fights are pretty standard, with a few standout situations like fighting a group of Argonian prisoners, or some overly confident turd who has an enchanted dagger he named Shimmerstrike. For me, what keeps me going through the arena isn't so much to see what next fight there is or what rewards there are, but just to see what kind of fucked up shit Owen's gonna say next.
You hit that orc so hard, her mother in Orsinium started bleeding.
If you talk to the Grey Prince as you climb the ranks, who's a weirdly friendly individual, you'll get to learn a bit about him and do the side quest for him. The whole point of the side quest, though, is to help him figure out his heritage, so this rather friendly individual can lose all will to live by hating himself.
I'm the spawn of evil.
It's obviously just there so you can kill the guy without feeling too bad, since he's like literally asking for it. It just leaves the whole quest line feeling a little, dark. Characters that are built around melee attacks will do well in the arena, but you can still get by for a stealth or mage type. You'll just have to cheese things a little bit to work out for you. After the climbing the ranks by defeating the Grey Prince, you'll be the esteemed champion. After this, you get to loot anyone you defeat in the arena, and you request different fights for easy gold. The main perk of finishing the quest line is getting the Adoring Fan. He doesn't help you out in any way, but he follows you around and provides the occasional compliment. I quite like having him follow me around town, or just seeing how he fares in the Plains of Oblivion. Some of the best items you can get in the game are actually from the different Daedric quests, which you'll find across different shrines scattered throughout Cyrodiil. Usually you get to learn a bit more about the lore behind the different Daedric princes while meeting some pretty colorful characters along the way, and then getting some item relevant to that prince. A lot of these quests are pretty odd, and I think they really make that weird side of Oblivion shine. One I found memorable was Shigora's quest, where you need to fulfill a prophecy which ends with a bunch of dead rats and burning dogs falling from the sky. Another one had some fun Alice in Wonderland kind of vibes to it, where you go into a fort which is a maze within a dream, and you progress as things continuously get more trippy. The best one, though, is easily where you get to crash a dinner party, cast a spell, and leave everybody running around naked and confused.
Assault! Assault!
I quite like the Thieves Guild questline. Elder Scrolls is like one of those games where I always tell myself I'm going to go in and be like a mage, or maybe a fighter, but I always end up with a stealth build. The Thieves Guild is a great way to quickly start building up your cash flow and work on that sneak stat. I just wish you could steal and flip your goods wherever, but somehow everyone within Tamriel knows exactly what belongs to who, so you need to use a fence to sell all that trash. The questline is a lot of what you'd expect from being in a Thieves Guild, taking from the rich while giving back to the poor of the Imperial City. You'll hear and see constantly about the Grey Fox, the leader of the guild, thanks to copy and paste dialogue and wanted posters thrown throughout Cyrodiil. They do a good job of building up the Grey Fox, and when you finally get to meet him, you find that he's just some guy who's been walking around the whole time, so that's kind of neat. And then you get to go on a big heist for an Elder Scroll. Honestly though, for me, the best part of the Thieves Guild questline is just in with Hieronymus Lex. Lex is the watch captain of the Imperial City, and the guild will point out he's always making things difficult for them, so they have a couple of fun quest lines where you have to get him off their back. First, you get to uncover a mole in your organization by planting evidence that he finds. Then you get to forge a letter of recommendation, which forces him to be transferred to outside the city. I think one of the things I've always liked about the Thieves Guild is they're always against, like, killing. That's something you're not allowed to do in the guild. So everything they do just always feels like just kind of fun mischief, which I suppose is contrary to the other guild we'll look at, the Dark Brotherhood. If you ask people to recall their favorite guild in Oblivion, I feel like a lot of them will say the Dark Brotherhood. You get to join the Edgy Boy cult, and it's pretty a memorable bunch. Everyone there is a psychopath. But I think my favorite is a Khajiit who just can't seem to help himself every time you walk by.
Let's get one thing straight. The tenants prevent me from killing you, but I don't have to like you.
Everyone in the Brotherhood is deranged in their own special way. Having to sneak around and assassinate people is weirdly satisfying in the creation engine. I think just because of how chaotic the whole thing is. You never know how all the NPCs are going to react to what you do, and that just adds to the charm of the whole game. On many quests, you can also get bonuses depending on how the person is killed, such as mounting them to a wall, or just using a certain weapon. The rewards in this questline are also pretty worthwhile. So the majority of my reruns of Oblivion, I usually end up doing the Dark Brotherhood at some point. Now, Oblivion got quite a bit of DLC. With how much DLC we deal with these days and how this practice is very common, it's easy to forget that Bethesda were the ones who introduced the Horse Armor DLC, which, at the time, was pretty controversial. Many people at the time refused to pay the insanely high price of $2.50 just for some horse armor. Although, many more apparently said hell yeah and picked the DLC up. And this sent a very clear message to Bethesda and other publishers at the time that people will buy just about anything if you put it in their game. I remember vividly scoffing at the DLC when it first released and thinking anyone bought it was a moron. I mean, obviously I own it now. But seeing that insane shift from 2006 to now, where every game has a battle pass you have to pay for and you get some sort of silly cosmetic, it's wild to think about the journey we've been on. Either way, most of the DLC in Oblivion is fine to pass up on. Most of it just adds different layers that you can use for different character types you may be playing. I sort of like the Wizard's Tower, as it gives you another place to make spells if you don't want to deal with the Mage's Guild. You can also get some spell tomes via DLC, or a new dungeon's got a decent dagger at the end of it. But ultimately, the two DLCs worth caring about are the Knights of the Nine and Shivering Isles. If you get the Game of the Year Deluxe Edition on PC, that'll come with everything, so you'll be all set there. However, if you get just the Game of the Year Edition, it actually only comes with two of the main DLCs. Same thing with console. If you get the Game of the Year Edition, it'll just come with the Knights of the Nine and the Shivering Isles DLC. It's also worth pointing out, if you were to put the second disc of the Game of the Year Edition into your Xbox, you'll get the DLC that way. Nice way to be able to unlock the DLC without buying it. Knights of the Nine is basically just an additional big quest line that gives you some pretty good gear. The story is the usual you'd expect with going out to fight evil, restore the knights to their former glory or whatever. It's all pretty forgettable. But the gear is good, and it's still more decent questing to do in the game. Shivering Isles, on the other hand, is a whole new area that really feels like Bethesda responding to the complaints people had about the base game.
I'm so happy I could just tear out your intestines and strangle you with them.
Oblivion is a good game, but the land of Cyrodiil definitely doesn't inspire the same sense of alien wonder that traversing the plains of Morrowind did. Seeing weird like stilt riders or experiencing another cliff race a PTSD episode. Morrowind did a great job of making you feel like you're in a weird and wonderful fantasy world. Oblivion, being set in Cyrodiil, has things feeling a bit more vanilla, with grassy plains and fighting goblins and skeletons. It's still good high fantasy, but it's just missing that weird edge that made games like Morrowind just so memorable. Shivering Isles feels like it tries to make Oblivion as weird as it can in the new location you get to explore. We move away from the more vanilla high fantasy and go back to giant mushrooms, alien skyscrapes, and whatever the fuck this thing is. There's lots to see and do in the Shivering Isles, along with unique gear to acquire. You can spend a good chunk of time exploring this DLC, and it's easily my favorite in the lot in Oblivion. If you've only ever played the base game, or you're just playing Oblivion on Game Pass or something, consider getting Shivering Isles, as it really adds a lot to the game. You'll meet some really interesting characters.
The precious, precious fork. Hear how it sings to Big Head.
If you're someone who spent the majority of your Elder Scrolls time playing a game like Skyrim, Going back to Oblivion may feel a little jarring, just because it feels like you're almost like a little less powerful, because you can't like dual wield spells, you don't have your shouts as well as an option. That being said though, you can still do a lot to break the game with spell and potion making, which will make you feel plenty powerful. For me personally, booting up vanilla Oblivion, I still find it's a very addicting game that I get quickly sucked into. The game plays great in PC today, the GOG version comes with no DRM, all the DLC, and will boot without issue on modern machines, and the game really doesn't look that bad. As stated earlier in the video, you can have the game run pretty nicely on newer Xbox consoles, and the majority of the gameplay footage here has actually been captured on a Series S. Kudos to Microsoft for keeping the game alive and well, but shame on you guys for all the other horseshit you do. Cut that out. If you still have an old 360 copy of Oblivion kicking around, throw that shit on Series X. It's a good time. PC players, as always though, get the best option of being able to mod the game until it's barely recognizable. I personally prefer playing games vanilla, and then just modding the shit out of it later to see how much I can squeeze out of the game. After with Bethesda games, there's a lot of, let's just call it nonsense that goes on behind the scenes, so having mods that can fix a lot of that is quite nice. Another aspect I always quite enjoy switching up is the whole leveling system of the game. Personally, I've always preferred how they gave out experience in Fallout, where you get XP from finding new locations, killing things, and just other noteworthy stuff, instead of just spamming the same action over and over again to get it to level. With mods, you can actually make this happen with Oblivion, and it's a refreshing change. In the footage you're watching now, I'm actually playing a mod collection called Oblivion Rebirth, which I recommend. It made the game feel fresh in many ways for me. You can also adjust other things that may bother you, like restoration taking an unreasonable time to level up. Texture and visual mods are a lot of fun too, although do be careful because I tried doing a character update on mine to make all the characters look more realistic, and then I went to go re-equip my armor on my Argonian character and got a face full of lizard conch. Always check if the mod you're downloading is safe for work or not, I guess. Mods are one of the things that make Elder Scrolls games so damn replayable, and there's still lots of fun to mess with today. Ultimately, I prefer playing vanilla with unofficial bug fixes installed, but it's still nice to be able to add new content and sometimes even new locations in the games to explore. Although most of the new user-made content feels like a fun novelty rather than a full expansion that I want to spend a lot of time in, I still love to see it all though, and honestly, it's one of the big reasons why Oblivion has been one of my favorite games for a long time.
Oh, what's the matter? Is the baby gonna cry? Oh!
When the game originally came out, I was graduating high school, so the world was a very different place. It received a ton of praise, and rightfully so. It wasn't the same kind of smash success Skyrim was, but it was still a very big success in many other ways, and I think it helped pave the groundwork for Skyrim. While the majority of my thoughts on Oblivion have been very positive, one of the pretty big sticking points is the overall level scaling of the game, as I keep hammering on about. It really does make the game eventually feel like kind of a grind. You can get around it just by having awesome items and really focusing on how you're leveling your character, but it's just annoying that this issue can sometimes pop up. I want to have my characters able to do all the quests and do all the content, but if I do that, all my skills are going to level up quite a bit, which means all the enemies are going to become unreasonably strong. Like, yeah, I can still play through the game like this, it's just every fight starts to really feel like a chore with how long it plays out. Enemies eventually will just become damage sponges, and it's just not super fun to fight. When you get to that point, it just feels like it's time to wrap up that adventure and maybe start a new build for a new quest. While Oblivion is my favorite Elder Scrolls game, I totally recognize not everyone's going to agree with me there. It has its shortcomings, but generally, it is still a blast to play. Even today, after all this time. Giving the game a review score today in 2024, I would still give the game a solid 8 out of 10, keeping in mind that the game got like glowing reviews when it first came out, lots of 9 out of 10s, 10 out of 10s. I don't think it's fair to ignore like some of the scaling issues the game has as much as I love it. Some aspects of the game haven't aged as gracefully as others, like the abominable-looking people, but to some, that's a feature. I think in many ways, it set the groundwork for many of the big open-world RPGs that we know and love today. You run into some issues like the scaling I talk about, and the overall interface can sometimes feel a little dated, but it all has its charm. Oblivion is without a doubt a flawed masterpiece. Let me know what your favorite Elder Scrolls game is in the comments. I always find it interesting to see how they can vary from person to person. Maybe your favorite's Oblivion like me. Maybe you think I'm a glue-sucking idiot. That's okay. I'd love to know. While Oblivion is my favorite, I do really love the other games in the series. Though I haven't really spent too much time with the first two games. Maybe that's a future video. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you want to see more rambling about video games. If not, just subscribe anyway. Just do it. Be cool. Sorry, one last thing. I know I just did a whole thing about saying please subscribe and all that, but I am actually working on an Elden Ring review, so I just wanted to share that. The new DLC came out, and it's really hard, but I'm making my way through it, and I'm having a good time. So I'd like to do a full review of the whole game now that it's a complete package. If you'd like to see that, please subscribe so you can see when I'm done with that. Hopefully that will be done somewhat soon. Okay, I'll go away now. Thanks so much for watching. You're a real one. Goodbye.